Live from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in beautiful downtown Raleigh, it's the Science Cafe with your host, Chris Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. Happy Science Thursday here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. You have found yourself at the Science Cafe. Tonight is when you can come into the museum, come into the Science Cafe, get a bite to eat, get a drink, and then get a bite of science, right? We try to bring you interesting topics every week, things that we think you want to know about, things that we think impact your life on a daily basis, or at least for many people, I think, impacts their lives in some way. And there's always fascinating research going on out there that touches all of us in lots of unique and interesting ways. Who here likes comic books, science fiction? Yeah, this guy in the back, he loves it. He's going nuts for it. Yeah, but one of the central tenets of a lot of these cool stories is that humans can be better than we are, right? There's always, right, you get a kid who gets bitten by a radioactive spider, and he becomes better than he was. You get, let's see, well, okay, Batman doesn't really count. He's just rich. You get what one? Iron Man, right? You get this incredible, very smart person who builds a suit that improves all of his functions, right? He can move, he can fly, he can do all sorts of incredible things. I don't know that researchers have quite built an Iron Man, right? And I don't know if they would want to. There might be some ethical questions with giving us that kind of power. At least me. Don't trust me with it. I'd have too much fun. But tonight, we've brought in scientists from the Joint Department of Biomedical Engineering at North Carolina State and UNC who are working on human robotics, right? The bionic human. How can we take technology, robotics, software, and actually find ways to improve lives for people? And tonight, I think we're going to learn a little bit about that from our speakers. I'm going to bring to the stage the first member of their team, and then I'll allow them to introduce the other members of their team. But welcome to the stage, Dr. Helen Huang. She is professor at North Carolina State with the Joint Department of Biomedical Engineering.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So yes, I'm Helen Huang. Together with me today, I brought two my lab member, Andy Brent and Stephanie Huang. So we three all come from Neuromuscular Rehabilitation Engineering Laboratory, which, like Chris said, yes, coming over. So we are in the joint department of biomedical engineering. So it's a joint department between NC State, we have red here, and then we have UNC, Chapel Hill, and I have a shirt say, better together.
The red's on this side, so
oh,
yeah.
Yep, all right, red, better together, yes. So we have very special department. Well, so we work on a technology, we are trying to, so the goal of my lab is trying to, using an engineering principle, engineering technology, innovation to, with the goal to help people with a disability to improve their quality of life. And as you can see, this is my, on the screen, this is the picture of my group. We are working on very exciting research. Everyone looks very happy. All right, so I'm going to start to talk about today's topic. So bionic human. Well, clearly, you have seen, a lot of this concept, right? Bionic human in a sci-fi movie, novel, comic, and I just show a couple of cartoons here. Well, so what is bionic human? Basically means part of the human became a machine, and this machine is so powerful, and it's actually giving this person a superhuman capability, all right? And this is fantastic concept, but it's not real. So it's it's still fiction. I don't know if you probably also heard a lot of news now about the bionic technology, bionic human. And then this is a reason it's true. So researchers, scientists now is trying to moving this concept from science fiction to a reality. And we are part of it. So what is the science of bionics? It's basically using the knowledge of a human biological system. And then we can apply this to solve an engineering problem. So specifically in my lab, we work on prosthetics, right? So because we see the challenge of amputee using the device. So inspired by a bionic concept, we are hoping we can make a bionic limb. Essentially, amputee would be able to use this device and also sense the device. Hopefully, it's close to the biological limb. That will tremendously help, their daily function activity. So we work on both upper limbs. So this is one of the example of the research we are doing. Is we're trying to predict the person's intent, amputee's intent of the movement of their missing limb through the neuromuscular signal. And then once we identify the intent, then we can do the neural control of artificial arm. We also work on artificial leg technologies related to prosthetic leg. So we make powered prostheses that not only trying to mimic the mechanical behavior of the missing leg, but also trying to build the connections between the human and the machine. So fundamentally, right, what's the science behind this? We really need to know how the human and wearable machine, such as prosthetics, robotic prosthetic device, how they interact with each other. So suppose this is two very different entities, okay? And we are also trying to figure out the mechanism. So hopefully this human and the wearable machine can build this symbiotic relationship. So what that means is not only they are physically attached with each other, but also they have to function intelligently, work together to adapt and thrive in their environment. Okay, so in this talk, we will focus on lower limb prosthesis for this talk, okay? And then we will tell, just showing you what's the state of the art, what the technology has been. And then, are we there yet? Did we already made the science fiction reality yet? So I'm going to hand over this talk to my great two colleague, smart engineer. So Stephanie Huang, and then she will first talk about the importance of self-efficacy in amputee.
Good evening. All right, so before I get started, I have a disclaimer. Which one's forward? Okay, one's forward. Okay, so before we start, we recognize that there are a lot of challenges in high-tech robotic devices reaching their intended user population, and that's something that I care deeply about. But this is a lively discussion, very short, just to talk about fantasy, reality, and how we're going to get there. And we'd love to discuss the challenges, the real-life challenges, after the talk with you, so just keep that in mind, and hopefully we'll be able to talk with you guys after the talk about those challenges. All right, so after amputation, lower limb amputees rely on prosthetic devices to get back to their life before they lost their limb. And it's just not getting back to life in terms of being able to walk to the grocery store, get in and out of your car. It's really about participating in all the activities that you love to participate in. So it's not just about living your life, but it's living your life to the fullest extent you want. And so you can just see here from the collage of pictures, there's a lot of diversity in amputees and the activities they participate in. And this brings me to self-efficacy, and I love this concept, or I love this way to quantify how much progress prosthetics have actually made in terms of an impact. And so this definition is self-efficacy is the belief in one's abilities to organize and execute the courses of action required to manage prospective situations. And I really like this because it's not just about the capabilities, but it's their belief in it. So oftentimes you can encourage the person, empower them to be able to basically achieve the capabilities that they're possible to do, or in our case, looking at how prostheses can enhance someone's capabilities. So looking at self-efficacy and trying to see how much we can improve the amputee's self-efficacy post-amputation is really honestly the end game. And another reason why self-efficacy is so important is because it is a determinant of how people think, behave, and feel. So that means a decreased or low self-efficacy can have very strong negative impacts on how you think, feel, behave. And on the opposite spectrum, an increase in self-efficacy can really improve the way we think, behave, and feel about ourselves. So again, that's really part of being human. So because this is fantasy, I actually found a really cool story from Marvel Comics that I wasn't too familiar with, but this is a great example of looking at self-efficacy of this character, Flash Thomas, Eugene Flash Thomas, and I wrote some notes here because I'm not very familiar. So as you can see, he looks like your typical high school jock, right? Football player, popular with the ladies, bullied Peter Parker, but admired Spider-Man. Later on, he joined the army. He was a decorated war hero. Unfortunately, he had both of his legs amputated in the Iraq War. And I really like this comic because here he is moving after he had his both legs amputated. And in the corner, if you can read it, it says, "Who would have guessed old football trophies and ratty concert tees would take up so many boxes?" And that's exactly the thing. I mean, being able to participate in things that you really love and enjoy and define who you are in your life, those are things that you lose right after amputation, and how can we get them back on their feet to do those things? And so this guy is asking, do you have someone to help you move? And he says, nope, I'm on my own. Next he says, oh, but don't worry, I'll put everything on easy to reach cabinets, making a joke out of it, and saying, forget it, man, I'm just messing with you, right? So it's not a big deal. But as you can see, he moves, he's in his empty apartment, he doesn't have prostheses yet, and the captions go, I am Eugene, quote unquote, Flash Thompson, recovering alcoholic, dark vigilante avenger with a broken wing. Whoop. Or am I Joe McCubicle of the Punch Clock McCubicles? So he went from decorated war hero to this state of just really, really very, very low self-efficacy. So it's interesting that it played that way in the comic. However, the story goes that he had an opportunity to host Venom, and I'm not sure it's a very risky thing to agree to, but he did. And the cartoon shows here, as he becomes Venom's host, he transforms, he's able to control Venom symbiote and grow legs, and in the last frame there he says yes. And I really love this because that really shows the amount of empowerment he can get from regrowing these bionic legs that he has. And his powers do become superhuman. So to summarize, Flash Thompson, bilateral amputee, decides to be the host of Venom symbiote. Self-efficacy skyrockets. He's Agent Flash with superhuman capabilities. So that's how it's portrayed in science fiction, and that would really be great in real life, minus the Venom symbiote part. But you can imagine a lot of people like Flash Thompson, and how can we use technology and devices to really get the self-efficacy to the point where they're feeling like they can live their entire life as they want, exactly how they want. So back to the real world. A real world superhuman test is Ninja Warrior. How many people know Ninja Warrior? Okay, right? It's just amazing fun to watch. And so this is pretty much, yeah, if you can do this, you're close to being superhuman. And you can see this girl here participating in some of the challenges. For those of you who don't know Ninja Warrior, it's full of these crazy obstacles, just really challenging. It looks easy, but if you attempt it, I guarantee you'll realize how difficult it is. And here's a video clip of her jumping, just seamlessly, right? She's like, I do this every day. But the thing is that this is actually quite a challenging task to complete. And yeah, so we're gonna use this to frame the discussion about how much self-efficacy people can gain from prostheses by looking at Ninja Warrior. So the fantasy here would be that bionic legs give amputee Ninja Warrior self-efficacy that is equal to non-amputee counterpart. So that would be our fantasy. If we can build a leg that allows the amputee to compete as their intact counterparts, that would be amazing. And now I'm going to pass it to Andy, and she's going to break down the reality of the science behind the bionic legs, and we're going to find out how close we are to our fantasy.
Thanks, Stephanie. It works. All right, so I'm going to walk you through some state-of-the-art devices that are available on the market today. We're going to look at both a more traditional mechanical and a bionic device for both the ankle and the knee. So first off, we have, keep in mind the self-efficacy comment that she talked about, because we're going to poll you guys afterwards. So first up is the Flex Foot. It's made out of carbon fiber, extremely lightweight, very durable. And you can see here, it's a family of devices, and you might use a different foot for running if you're in the Paralympics or just running for fun. And then you have one on the left that looks more like an everyday foot. And so because the mechanical properties of these devices are fixed, people choose to have different ones for different activities. And you might remember seeing articles about the blade or the curved running foot sparking some scientific debate and studies, wondering if amputees with these feet have an unfair advantage. Next up is the bionic ankle or the powered ankle. And inside of there, you can see in the little gray box, there's actually a motor, and the black part, we have one here today, is a battery, and there's a computer chip inside to control it all. And that motor provides and can actually generate power, very different from the Flex Foot. You can see here, instead of switching out the hardware part, you can just change the software, and the controller can adjust the mechanical properties of that ankle, and he's able to do a variety of tasks with the same device, very naturally. So, one of the headlines of an article from The Guardian said, what if a bionic leg is so good that someone chooses to amputate? And the article featured the biome and the powered ankle. So given the Flex Foot we just talked about and the powered ankle and the option of having no leg, which of these do you think, A, B, or C, would give an amputee who's lost his leg or his ankle joint the highest self-efficacy competing in Ninja Warrior? You guys can just shout it out, raise your hand, whatever. C? I heard C. All right, powered ankle. We're going to take a look at a Bologna and what device he chose, Bologna amputee, sorry, and see which device he chose to compete with. Can you guys tell which device it is? No, yeah, the Flex Foot. He actually chose the Flex Foot, and you can see how he's using it. It's not functioning like his other intact limb. You can see he's more relying on his intact limb and using the Flex Foot more as an anchor sometimes in some of these tasks, right? So we're going to talk more about why he made that decision, but let's go through the knee devices first. So the mechanical one is the hydraulic knee, which you would have a Flex Foot attached to that as the ankle joint. And inside there's a hydraulic system or compressed fluid that controls how quickly the knee swings out. You can adjust that resistance for each user. And then the bionic version would be a microprocessor knee, which also has hydraulics inside, or a powered knee, which is what we use to test on in the lab, and we have the commercialized version here as well. And that one, like the powered ankle, has a motor inside of it. It can generate power, unlike these other devices. You can see with the same device, you can adjust the controller to perform a variety of tasks without having to switch out any hardware there. Stepping over objects, stairs. Yeah, going down hills. I think that leap is probably the most amazing one in the video. And this is straight from the Genium website, which is the company of the microprocessor knee shown there. And their website advertises this device, the newest Genium X3, as having no limits. And someone wearing it in a news article said something, if he felt like it was something out of the Terminator or RoboCop. We're going to ask you the same question. See if you guys can get it right this time. no leg, mechanical knee, or microprocessor, or powered knee. Sorry. C? All right. Let's see what an above knee amputee would use. He's missing his knee and ankle joint in the Ninja Warrior Challenge. Yeah. He was using a mechanical knee for a daily life, which he had high self-efficacy with that device in his daily life, but when presented with challenging obstacles like this Ninja Warrior, somehow the cost of using that device outweighed the performance gains he was getting from using it. It's interesting to us as well. It's pretty shocking. So let's first understand what's happening inside that controller and why that might be the case. So inside Bionic legs, they all have this controller that does the same thing where it splits continuous movements, cyclic movements like walking or running, into very discrete states. And you can see here, this is knee motion during one stride, and it's split into 4 states. Within each of those states, the controller can tell the motor or hydraulics how much force is to put about that joint. And to transition between each of those states, it needs to have some signals from the onboard sensors to meet some force criteria or angle criteria before it can safely transition. If you put it in an automated loop altogether, you get smooth, continuous movements like level ground walking or running. But the requirement here is that the behavior must be cyclic, structured, and well studied, unlike the Ninja Warrior tasks. But you can combine it with another very cyclic movement, like, for example, stair ascent, stair descent, something like that. And you can program it into the controller, add some transition. A lot of people have little remote controls or a smartphone app or tap on their leg to switch modes. And you can add more ones. I think Genium now has, I think, up to 5 activity modes, which is pretty awesome. You can do cycling modes, whatever you want to input. But there is a limit to these devices, right? There is a point where you can only program so many tasks before it becomes impractical for the controller. And that might be one of the reasons, maybe aside from the weight of the battery and such, that the cost of using the device in a Ninja Warrior Challenge would outweigh the performance gains. So the moral of the story here is that bionic prostheses can mimic biological behavior. You see that in all the earlier videos, but they can only do what they're programmed to do. And as researchers, we are here today. We talked about the current state of the art, but we want to tell you what we're working towards. We're working on flipping that scale. We want the performance gains to significantly outweigh those costs, right? Whatever it is, the battery weight of the device. So one way we can do this is to make those basic cyclic tasks that it can do really well more adaptive to different changes in the environment. So it's not that we're walking on level ground indoors, firm surfaces all day long, right? We might interact with the environment, walk on sand, gravel. I don't know what you might have walked on uneven sidewalk on your way here. And you might be picking up groceries in the grocery store, carrying your child like this one in the photo there. These are all different variations of basic tasks that controllers these days cannot handle or don't address. And that is one thing that I'm looking at in the lab, is understanding how amputees walking with powered devices, we have a experimental powered knee in the lab, walking with gravitational load, and we have found that yes, it does make a difference. It is detrimental to carry these things, and these variations are something we need to look into. And we were able to maintain the same biological behavior by adjusting the controller to match the load that they were walking with. That's one area for advancement. Stephanie, just going to talk about another area of advancement in the research field.
All right, so, whoops, I need the clicker. All right, so I'm actually going to back it up a little bit to here. I think Andy made a really great point, and I want to reiterate this. It is so important because we adapt all the time, our biologic joints. We are really good now at automatically adapting. We've learned through a lifetime of interacting with our environment how to make very subtle changes, and we're used to doing what we want when we want to do it when we're doing these tasks like this. But like Andy mentioned, that's not so easy when you're limited with a prosthetic device that has artificial intelligence, or not artificial intelligence yet, just automated, right? So They're working on artificial intelligence. However, I'm going to say, what if prosthesis behavior was not automated but freely controlled by the amputee? And you can see here, we can do this by using descending motor commands. And what I mean by that is when I contract my muscle, let's say here to flex my bicep to move my joint, it is the signal from my brain going down my spinal cord, innervating the muscle, my muscle contracts, and it accelerates the joint, right? So amputees still have that pathway from their brain to their residual muscle. Right now in the devices, it's not connected to anything, but the signals are still good. We can pick up motor intent from the residual muscle. So that's what I'm really, really interested in, and that's what I'm focusing on in the lab right now. So how to record muscles? We can record it from the surface of the muscle. We basically record the voltage difference, and the amplitude of that smooth signal gives us an idea of how much force the muscle is producing. So now if we take this, that's a picture of an amputee's residual muscle. The dots there are over the residual muscles. We can record the muscle signal, smooth that out to get a control signal, and input it to an actuator. So these are called pneumatic artificial muscles. They're really great as a test bed to test different biologic control signals from the muscle. And you can see here that it shortens and contracts when the voltage is high, and that's just like our muscle. Our muscles contract, and our muscles generate force because the ends are fixed, right? So when it's free, when the end is free to move around, there's no force generation, but when you tie the muscles down, now I can generate an enormous amount of force. So this is just a test bed for the controller, an experimental powered prostheses. So you can see two sets of muscles, one in the front, one in the back. And this is a picture, a close-up of an amputee raising up on his toes by contracting his residual calf muscle. And this is really amazing because just the simple task of raising up on both of your toes is something that you cannot do with any commercial prosthesis right now. Even the most high-tech ones, you can't do that simple task. Okay, and so this is an example of just some videos I'll play. You can see the girl contracting her residual muscle. It goes directly to that prosthesis. There's no automation. We want to study what is the fullest capability of the amputee without having constraints of automation. So again, any movement going on is directly recording from her residual muscle. We have sensors here, and it's going to inflate the pneumatic actuators. And here's her just walking, taking a few steps. And you can see that she's generating a bit of push-off power there. Whoops. And here's another example of someone just kind of playing around with the device. Oh no. He's not cooperating. Basically what you're gonna see him do is I'll imitate it. So imagine I'm him, okay, and he's looking down and he's going like this. And he's going like this, and he's going like this, okay? But it looks exactly like my ankle, it really truly does, okay? So just imagine that's what he's doing. That's what that video shows. And, oh, see, I was pretty good, right? I feel like I was doing that, yeah. Okay, okay. See, yeah, okay. I know this video very well. Anyway, so, the thing that blew me away on this, so this is from my PhD work, which motivated me completely to continue. I wouldn't be doing research if it wasn't for this. I knew that it was going to be different from automated control. I knew there was going to be something special from letting them directly communicate to the device, but I didn't know the extent of that. And if we remember what self-efficacy is, determinants of how people think, behave, and feel, I'm going to end with just sharing some feedback, unsolicited, from people who are in the lab walking with that device. And I want to emphasize, they just walked on the treadmill. This thing's heavy, it's clunky, it makes lots of sounds because it's pneumatics. They're on a treadmill just walking, and this is the impact that had just from that experience. One girl said it felt like a sense of rebirth, right? I had more freedom, it felt like I was younger, but also more complete. This was from someone who had his amputation as a teenager in the 70s, and it really affected his ability to live his life how he wanted, and he felt like he was younger, more complete. It was amazing. And also, the guy in the video who wasn't cooperating in the beginning, the guy who was tapping his foot, he said he felt like a science fiction thing. I was the Terminator, I was Luke Skywalker with a new hand. I felt like I was Avatar with a new body. And he also just complained all the time. He says, get me off the treadmill, I want to do this, I want to do that. Like, you know, he just complained about the rigidness of what I was doing. But he would, you know, think about, I want to play competitive volleyball, I want to be able to spike the ball, I want to be able to play like the kick drum, I want to be able to go to a rock concert in the mosh pit, I want to be able to go to the stadium. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's good. Like, but the thing is, him experiencing this really opened his mind to the idea of what was possible. And the girl who said it was a sense of rebirth, she was a congenital amputee. She didn't necessarily feel that much of an improvement because she was so much used to her intact or her prosthesis since she was a kid. But after she came into the lab a couple of times, she did realize something felt off, right? So I think that this direct connection really opens the amputee's eyes on what's possible. So moving forward, we're going to continue to look at this, look at not one muscle, but two muscles, look at challenging postural control tasks, and really try to push the envelope. And the intent is, okay, we're going to see how much the human can do, the full capability, and then with automation, combine that, and hopefully, in the future, yeah, Ninja Warrior. And that's the end, so I guess Dr. Helen Huang and Andy Brandt.
Wow, this is a great job. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Andy. And well, I hope you feel the excitement of my lab. They definitely love what they do. Okay, before the end, I want to bring three persons actually to the stage. Charles, Hunter, come on, and then Stephen. So they are actually my research participant. I have to say we can't. I have to say we can't do anything without their help because our research is not directly benefit them right now. But without them to spend the time being able to be here and tell in the lab and give us feedback what they need, we won't be able to move things forward. And then so for that, I thank you so much. Give a big applause.
Thank you very much. All right. I know you all have questions. My mind is blown right now at the work you're doing and the way that you're changing people's lives. That's really incredible stuff. Okay, your turn. If you have questions, you can raise your hands. I have a mic. Katie there has a mic. We'll bring one to you to ask your question. Just let us know if you have a question by raising your hand.
Hi. So I'm a social scientist by training and career, and I think it's really wonderful that you're trying to integrate the biomedical engineering with social psychology. So that's, congratulations on doing that. And I'm wondering, there would be many ways to expand those connections, and maybe we'll talk for a moment afterwards. You emphasized the think, behave, and feel. I think we could call those dimensions of self-efficacy. And so I'm wondering if you are measuring the impacts of your interventions on these dimensions of self-efficacy, and assuming that you are, whether you've detected differences in the impacts on these different dimensions.
Okay, so thanks for the question. And the honest answer is right now we are not measuring that. But from the experience that I had, I know that that's very, very important. Most of the research that's done on self-efficacy is honestly in this area, on the lower end of self-efficacy, is about getting back to work and all of that. It is common that we work with very high-functioning amputees, and we're trying to incorporate more of the spectrum of that. But what I noticed is that even though you see, for example, a below-knee amputee walking down on the street, and they have a lot of pride about, oh yeah, it's a big deal. They lost their limb, they get up, they can do the daily activities, but they're still missing something, So it's just not about walking on level ground, being able to navigate, in mundane tasks. They want to do everything they did before. So you can imagine someone whose livelihood was participating in martial arts. And so when I talk about self-efficacy, yes, the lower end is definitely important because you want to get them back to work at least, right? But for me, I think it is important on that high scale. And so I'm not familiar with the research and I haven't found anything on that high end. But I think we're interested in collecting data. When I have amputees come in and I ask them, what do you wish you could do? There are things you wouldn't even imagine. And I think that is actually very important. And so I would love to try to find collaborators and see, can we actually start putting a focus on, look, it's not just good enough for level ground walking. We want these people to be participating in all of the social activities exactly how they want to, and really try to highlight that importance. So.
Can I add one more? So we're engineer. We want a collaborator. What you mentioned is great. If you have a great colleague who could work with us, we want to, because, you know, this matters to us.
I mean, I just want to say that one really interesting thing is survey data. There's a lack of information that has been published, right? So we don't even know what the amputees want to do. I had them in the lab and I asked them that, but it'd be great to actually collaborate where we can actually get survey data and say, hey, look, I'm going to publish this. It is important for you to pay for this person's device. It is important for you to not have them pay out of pocket. So I feel like it's a long-term goal too, right? Justifying the need to really push these high-end devices to reach a larger population. So yeah, social sciences are gonna have to help us get us there.
Great talk, guys. I think I have more of a pure physiology basic question. When you guys were talking about something Stephanie mentioned, when you were saying that you have a residual limb and you have that innervation that is supplying, that you're taking advantage of to power a new limb. I was just curious, like, I'm thinking when you think about Wolff's Law, where your body's going to atrophy if it's not in use. So if you don't take advantage of that innervation early on, can you like teach the body to regrow those nerves? So yeah.
Just to let you know, we just write a proposal about it. We want, so usually, you know, people after amputation, they don't exercise those muscles most of the time. And actually, we feel, and a lot of studies actually suggest, you know, and then specifically for using the muscle to control the device, this is so important. We need to condition those muscles to in a good condition so that they could be able to generate a reliable signal. And also, there's a study has shown the way they can use their residual muscle and being able to related this muscle contraction to the consequence, such as the ankle motion, might help them to actually reduce the phantom pain. So we wrote a proposal. Hopefully, got funded. Hopefully.
Yeah, I want to point out that I'm not sure if your background is in physiology, but I think unless you work firsthand with amputees recording muscle signals from the residual muscle, you don't realize how much disturbance there is to their peripheral systems. You are literally chopping off their muscle, and a lot of people actually assume that they might act like intact muscles, right? So one of my focus areas is looking at residual muscles, and the amount of physiological change is so variable. It depends on surgical procedure, it depends on the health of the muscle before, it depends on what they've been taught during rehab, but there is plasticity, so there is the ability to change those muscle activation patterns. The thing right now is that there's no reason for the amputees to be changing the patterns because they're not actively engaged in altering the biomechanics, right? So after amputation, you'll see a completely different type of pattern across amputees, and they're completely different than intact. But there is some capability to change it. So if you were to take the residual muscle, which has no purpose right now biomechanically, and link it to a powered prosthesis that actually generates some function, I believe that they will learn to remap that, and then they'll reinforce motor patterns that give them the biggest payoff. And then if you want to talk later, we should talk later, because it's all about sensory feedback loop and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to go into that. But yeah, definitely the physiological changes cannot be underestimated in terms of the importance in understanding that for the control of these devices.
Hi, I have a question over here. So first of all, I am just very heartwarmed to see 3 women presenting on robotics. Being a fellow engineer, way to go. And also I wanted to ask, have you considered AI principles to like reprogram the controller based on the working limb and just kind of personalize it, you know, on that absurd behavior?
Wow. Right on point. So we currently has a project. So Yue Wen is actually is a student working on this project. So we are trying to use the machine learning, artificial intelligence, to personalize the assistance. So, for example, for person, you know, every person is different, and when amputee go to a clinic to feed those device, those parameters, so you didn't see those control parameters, has to be manually adjusted by clinics, so clinicians, so prosthetists. So what they do is they let the person to walk with a set of parameter, and then see somewhere it's not that right, and then they have either app or computer software to adjust the parameter back and forth, see, and then let the person to do that again. It's time intensive, it's not accurate, right? It's money. And then also the most ridiculous part is once it's set, this parameter is set, out of the clinic, this parameter is it's one thing. It's just the one value, no longer change in the real life. So we have show you the person that walk, in a clinic, very clean surface, level ground, perfect. But when they go to, the street, the real environment, things change. So we are trying to use an AI approach to make it adaptive and then automatically adjust those parameters. So that's exactly what we're working on. Thank you for the question.
Awesome, thanks.
So my sense is that try this one. Between the sort of the two ends of the system that you're working with, the brain, where you're trying to get the brain to send messages to the artificial limb so that it can function, you have the most sort of immediate potential in the actual engineered limb. And in theory, you could probably end up making it almost perfect. It could be really lightweight. It could be versatile in every dimension. It could be ultimately whatever you want it to be. But what do you think are the limits to what the transmission of signals from the brain and the interface between the the end of the neural passage and the limb ultimately are? Are there things that can't happen?
Yeah, it's really great to hear someone say that you think anything's possible, and we would love to believe that too, and I think it will happen. But the part that we didn't talk about, we were talking about the command sent to the muscle, but we didn't talk about sensory feedback. So the really important thing to understand is that amputees also lose sensory feedback. So when I'm standing here, I have all sensory information from my foot, cutaneous information, force feedback. When I contract my muscle, my antagonistic muscle tells me how much that's contracting, and that helps me understand the state that my body's in. So without even looking, I can, I know what my body position is and all of that, and that helps me update and generate the proper motor program to adjust the signal sent. So I can update the error and all that. The problem is with amputees that, let's say I have my limb amputated to here, I have a prosthesis and I'm standing on it. I have pressure from that gives me an estimation of the forces from the ground up to my leg, but it's not anywhere near as good as the intact sensory system that I have. So I'm missing all this information. In order for you to use a device where you control it directly with your brain signals, you need to know how to update that signal. So for instance, if I'm gonna push her, that's kind of rude, but if I were to push her and I didn't know that she was contracting her muscles to stop me, then I'm not gonna push her, right? So that force I'm generating, I underestimated, but I can very quickly update that and just give her a much harder shove and, have my mission accomplished, not that I want to hurt her. But so the idea is that if I didn't know or couldn't sense the force between my hand and her body and understand that I wasn't pushing hard enough, I wouldn't know to generate more force. So in the videos I showed where people are walking with the powered prosthesis, they were constantly, I didn't show it, but they were constantly looking down their foot. In the early learning stages, when they thought they were doing something with their foot, like they thought they were landing on the heel of their foot on the prosthesis, but they were landing on the ball of the foot, they really have a very poor ability to estimate the state. So sensory feedback is as important as the motor command. So the task that you want the amputee to complete via feed-forward neural control, you must give the amputees enough information to complete that task. So it's very unreasonable to say, amputee, use your residual muscles to control this. Oh, you can't do it. When you're the one who didn't get the information needed to update the controller. So it really is about completing that loop, and that's a whole nother challenge, but people are working on it.
Hey, good talk, guys. So you just talked about kind of not having that proprioceptive feedback. without that, is the kind of motor control to the limb, is that all, I guess, intentional every time? For example, if I'm walking, I don't necessarily think about moving my right foot forward, but with these amputees and with these signals, do they have to think consciously, I'm going to move my ankle this much?
Yes. Okay, great question. So I still have debate with Stephanie Huang. We always say, because she show, directly EMG control can walk. And I use autonomous control and some of the neural signal to switch the mode. So that's a very different, so I rely more on the autonomous control. And she used the neural control. And I said, well, during walking, you don't think about how you control your ankle, knee, right? So you can talk, you can drink a coffee. So she believed after certain time, can I make a subject? After certain duration of the training, and then this control of the muscle during walking will become automatic. I think if that's true, then it's a very intriguing, there's a potential. We haven't, and then I don't think anyone has showed that. But on the other hand, I do think the direct neural control is so important for many, many, many tasks that is not cyclic. For example, anticipatory posture control. So when you give me a very heavy thing, I will send a signal from brain to think about, okay, I better tense up my ankle, right? Or, if I want to dance, for example, right? So these require a directly neural control. I don't think, just autonomous control can do much about it.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a great opportunity to bring in the last question. I think it will become automated if the sensory feedback loops are intact, okay? So it depends on how good the complete system is. So there have been studies that showed if you have a very, very well-practiced task that, you can see if you do EEG and different brain areas light up, it will migrate down to the brainstem. And so I saw this paper and I was like, oh my gosh. So if you practice it enough and you have enough sensory information to do that, I think it will become sort of second nature. And as anecdotal evidence, the guy who said he felt like Luke Skywalker when he was walking, the really expert users of the powered prosthesis, just walking with the residual muscles with poor sensory feedback, he would walk and twiddle his thumbs and all this stuff and look out, and he was able to walk how he wanted to without thinking about it. But the extent of automation is still highly, highly questionable. But automation will most likely be combined with volitional control. I do not think, just for the record publicly, that volitional control is going to be 100%. So I think that we have to combine the systems, and the person who asked about AI over there, that the human has to know what the autonomous controller part is thinking and vice versa. So the AI can't just do AI by itself. It has to tell the user, and the user has to be aware of that to really maximize both.
You've talked a lot about amputees, but can you speak at all to the folks who were, for whatever reason, born without a leg, and what kind of help you can offer for them?
Well, so for autonomous control, for example, the Biome or Power Knee, these definitely, no matter if it's a trauma caused or congenital, they all can benefit out of this. So that's one thing. And then for, I never had a chance to work with congenital amputee use the EMG control. So probably Stephanie has yeah. So usually they still have, the muscle still firing. So they still generate the activity. So I believe the female subject that you show, participant you show, she is actually congenital. Yeah. So yes, this is still useful. Yes.
The one important thing is just learning, okay? So I want to emphasize that for the congenital amputee, they have spent an entire lifetime learning how to walk and engage in the environment without their leg. And I really feel like humans are really able to adapt to their environment and adapt to how their body changes, but it requires time. So I have worked with maybe 3 congenital amputees. Their muscles are smaller, but the nerves still innervate the tissue. And in my opinion, they might not know what feels biologic. So their idea of what the device can do to help them might be a little bit limited. So they might not sense that as much, but I believe that they might require more learning. But as long as they have nerves innervating the muscle and they have enough time learning to reinforce new patterns and have a little more guidance, I feel like they could benefit as much as someone who was a traumatic amputee who lost their leg 6 months ago. So I think it's all about just learning and time.
So I have a question, because we saw a couple of pictures from Andy and Stephanie from both of your research projects where individuals were wearing the prosthesis and they were on treadmills or they were sitting and they were moving the residual limbs. But what kinds of data are each of you actually collecting? Is it the force generated from the limb? Are you looking at, I saw buttons and balls attached to the prosthesis and to their other limbs. So are you looking at them like through high-speed cameras? Like, what gives you the data to say that something's working well or not working well?
You're exactly right. There are buttons on them. We have little markers, reflective markers on every joint and segment so that we can recreate the body in a computer software. And then from that, you have all the XYZ positions of their limbs. And on those treadmills, there's 2 belts. You get ground reaction forces that every time you step, you're creating a force back. We're recording each of those from each limb, and then through some calculations and in the software, you can get joint angles, moments, velocities, and even joint forces at each of those joints, and we can look at whole body movements as well. So that's a lot of what we're quantifying, and you can see there's a lot of favoritism for the intact limb. Their intact limb is generating more forces than the prosthetic side, and so idea is when we're testing these types of controllers, we want to see the migration over, have it more balanced, see that the prosthesis is doing something for them, and that's how we would quantify and measure that. Yeah.
Yeah, the other component is just signal processing. So if you record muscle activity, you can look at the type of muscle activation. Are they synchronizing their muscles? How fast do they fatigue? And things like that. So definitely on the biomechanical end, there's that. And then also from the central nervous system part, there's all the signal processing. So all the EMG is free to record. So we do that.
While the microphone's migrating, I have another thought too. How can this be applied, or could this be applied to actually doing comic book kind of stuff, enhancing someone who is whole of body? I don't know what the right word terms for that are, I'm sorry. But, can you hook a powered prosthesis up to somebody and make them run faster? Or maybe I can direct this better to what you actually study. Is there a way that an ankle and a knee should move that is better than the way we do it now?
You want to answer that?
So one of my very facetious PhD advisors was like, Stephanie, why don't you just attach a wheel to the amputee's leg? And I was like, what? Why would I attach a wheel to their leg? So for an amputee, I think the possibilities are, we're not very creative, honestly. So I feel like there could be options.
I would disagree with that statement.
Okay, we are very creative, but
thank you.
We could also be creative in different directions. Is that better? So I think that, I think what Andy said was right. So we often assume that intact gait is good, but there's really no reason to believe that. So if you have an amputee who's congenital, who grew up learning how to walk with a prosthesis, they're not going to have the same strategies for accomplishing things. So I think that there is some out-of-the-box thinking. But to answer your question before that, you can, if you wanted to be Iron Man, not flying, but if you wanted to have superpowers, you could program whatever you want. So I think Andy emphasized that before, is that if you have an automated controller, if you can figure out how to program it, then it will do it. So automation will do what you program it. So Hugh Herr from MIT, there's a TED Talk where he has a Boston Marathon bomber victim dancing. And when we emailed him, we were like, what is that? Please don't tell me that's a lift and control, because that's what we're doing. And he said it was a cleverly designed state machine. If you want to, spend the time to get the data in the lab, get empirical data, figure out all the transitions, figure out all the mechanical properties, you could behave like a superhero, but that's only going to work for the superhero. So unless you want to act like a superhero at all times of your day, which would look ridiculous, you probably wouldn't want to do that. Yeah. Yeah, same task over and over. I don't know. Yeah, so it's just automation can do whatever you want as long as you program it.
Going back to collecting the data, when you've got all the electrodes attached to the amputated limb, do you also collect data from the, I didn't notice in the video, from the unamputated limb to compare how it works and to possibly, for lack of a better term, cross-train the amputated limb? Is that?
EMG? Yeah. I see.
It's on muscle signals, right?
Yeah. I previously, I think, I didn't. So I actually didn't. So I don't know if you have done the intact.
Yeah, very, very short as a question. So in my beginning of my PhD, no one knew if the residual muscles were like intact, so we did. We recorded both intact and the residual muscle. And honestly, I have to say, when you amputate the limb, there is no end effector. There is nothing actuating it. The muscles aren't going to do anything. Like, we are all lazy, whether or not we like to admit it or not, but we're not going to generate and retain those patterns, because the patterns that our intact muscles generate are reinforced by having an intact system. So I have recorded both intact and residual muscles, and with the amputees, they're completely different from intact muscles. And so I think it is really important to record it, to show it, and then yes, definitely, you can record intact muscle and residual muscle and see, with the powered prosthesis, are the muscle activation patterns going to migrate back towards what the intact was? So yeah, definitely recording both sides is important.
I have a question. I'm curious how each of you has come into this research. Did you come into it through the engineering angle or the biological angle, or both? It's because it's such a cross-disciplinary thing. That's a journey.
That's a great question. So I didn't talk about the background of my group. So in my lab, the student come in. Usually they have training in engineering, electrical, mechanical, biomedical, and then we also have a student who has background in physiology, kinesiology, and Andy is very special. She had a mathematics in a bachelor degree, so she's doing really well actually. So it's I think this type of research really require people came from different angle to look at this thing. So for example, we also work with the clinicians, right? So we work with clinic people, their feedback, and then our participants' feedback, and then we have someone has the motor control, human movement control background. So when they address this thing, will be very different from mine. So actually, I learned a lot from them. So yeah, that's answer your question.
So Andy, how did you think to even go into this kind of work, being from mathematics?
I wanted to apply my math background somehow, and I also have a physical disorder, and that interests me into the health field, but I know I wasn't going to be an MD or anything like that. I wanted to be able to change the way people are treated, and that led me to her lab. I mean, she combines all of that together, people with physical disabilities and an engineering, or math, in my case, abstract math, but it all combines together.
I want to add one thing. I really am interested in human design. So if you talk about roboticists who only build robots, they don't understand how difficult humans are. So if you get the best PhD robotics person and they built like a humanoid or a dog or something that just looks amazing, it's just robot alone, when you say, okay, well, we want that robot to work with the human. It is a whole different story. So I think my interest actually is really bringing in accommodating the human, understanding the variability, appreciating the challenge of that, and just really emphasizing the human factors part. So definitely human factors design drives a lot of what I look at.
You indicated in the automated systems, there's a limit of about 5 movements that you can do. Why is there a limit on that with processors and memory and stuff like that these days?
Well, so it's not about memory, I feel, okay? So it's about the task. So for example, using a dancing as an example. So, you know, previously MIT professor showing the dancing, which is the first time someone showing that the amputee could use their amputated ankle and be able to generate those moves. So it's a great work. And then, but you have to study really like the entire flow of this whole piece, and then you can program. So if we know, for example, Ninja Warrior, yes, the Ninja Warrior, if we know how to program every task, okay, then this can be done. Yeah, but do we know? Do we know? So, I mean, we do all kinds of activities. Everyone is different. We have different, you know, different hobby, I guess. So, do we know every movement? What's the desire? What is the right program for everything? So that take a long time, and also the transition, right? So, for example, again, dancing. If I suddenly, you know, there's music come up, and then I just want to do the free dance. So what are we gonna do? Yeah, so that's really the limit.
I think the amount of data and time it requires to get the information needed to program it cannot be underestimated. So for the biome that you saw that is just level ground walking, that was years and years and years and years of studying someone walking on the treadmill or having someone walk on the stairs. So you see a program, but what you don't see in the background is all this data being recorded, doing the same exact task. So the states have to be well understood. So, you know, it just becomes a point of saturation. You know, it really does. And the thing is, it's time, money, information, just it's costly on the information side of it. It's just, yeah, so it takes a lot of data.
I think that will have to have been our last question. So thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause. Fantastic job.
Thank you.
Wonderful stuff. I think I would say thank you for doing the work that you do. You're doing some really cool stuff, and you're obviously very good at it. Very great. So thank you for being here at the Science Cafe tonight and sharing your work with us. Thank you all for being here at the Science Cafe tonight with us here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Again, we'll be back here next Thursday night with another great Science Cafe presentation because it's a Greg Fishel Town Hall. Next Thursday night, join us for a free event over in the Nature Exploration Center, the main building of the museum, for a town hall on climate change with Greg Fishel. We're going to be talking about sustainable development in cities. Sustainable cities. So talk to your city planner friends and tell them that they need to come with you to the Greg Fishel Town Hall next Thursday night. Same time, different place. Everyone, travel safe. We hope to see you again here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.